So The Wandering Inn does a really, really good job of goblins. I love it when I encounter things in writing where it's so clear that, like, the author and I have had exactly the same thought at exactly the same time. We've approached it from different ways, certainly. But The Wandering Inn has done an absolutely excellent job of humanizing, goblinizing goblins, which you'd think would be natural. The thing is, there's a line that I've certainly given a lot of thought to, and by the way, this video may or may not be sponsored. If a thing just popped up, then yeah. With things like Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs, and like the general fantasy vibe these days, there's often a desire for monsters or fantasy races that are, like, people-y enough, but also monster-y enough. Like, you want these goblins. You want your goblins to be both monster-y enough that if you see, like, a bunch of goblins, you're like, alright, we need to kill all these goblins. But also be people-y enough that you could play them as a player character and have that be a thing that just doesn't work. Now, I personally would think that hopefully these two things would be mutually exclusive. I feel like, no, that's just a little guy that deserves love and respect, and kill them all should be mutually exclusive. I feel like having even species that are like, no, they're absolutely all evil is maybe something we can avoid, yeah. In fact, in something like Freerun, where we have the demons and they are, like, canonically, no, they're all super evil, yeah. People often felt really, really uncomfortable with the idea of just like, oh, there's just some people that are people-y enough, but they're definitely all evil. The thing I really liked about this discussion is that is a very good discussion to be having. The fact that we're uncomfortable with the idea that the author is just like, no, these guys are all evil. The fact that we're like, that's good. So The Wandering Inn does goblins fantastically. In The Wandering Inn, goblins are monsters. They are monstrous. They are like the number one thing that people probably have to be worried about when traveling, for example. They're constantly raiding villages and towns. They're bloody all over the place. It's been seen that they can never really be fully gotten rid of. That's the thing that we've tried and it didn't work so well. They need to be constantly managed because things will start spiraling out of control. A while ago, I was making an elaborate David Bowie reference, and it's one of the few things that is actually on my Patreon. It's all on here, alright? It's all already on here. So I approach the issue by making goblins a massively metamorphic species, something like leafcutter ants, that have a lot of different bioforms. That different individual goblins, under certain circumstances, availability of resources and things like that, will epigenetically metamorphosize into other forms. As there are more resources, as their society adapts to, the larger number, more and more goblins will metamorphosize into hobgoblins, or, commander types, or mage types, and things like that. Even less combat capable than the considered standard goblin that function as artisans and things like that. All to gradually build up enough biomass to gradually bring forth the Goblin King. Because I'm making a David Bowie reference. The Wandering Inn, because it is Elite RPG, it has this system of, like, leveling up and stuff like that. And yeah, no, the obvious thing to do is that as goblins, build up their warrior classes, they eventually metamorphosize into a hobgoblin. As they level up in, like, leader and tactician classes, then maybe a goblin chieftain if they reach certain points. What's really great at this point is that the goblins don't super understand why it is what they are. Why they are... Was that a sentence? Goblins don't super understand their deal. So the author of The Wandering Inn introduces these mechanics, such as goblin chieftains are able to see back in time through kind of genetic memory, which doesn't super matter. It's magic, though. It's fine. They are able to learn from previous chieftains and previous goblin lords and even goblin kings' memories. And I'm not sure if this is exactly the mechanic, but in the same way that a goblin shaman is a specialized magic-using biomorph that absorbs the collective mana pool of the tribe and is able to utilize that with magic, is heavily implied. I'm not actually that far into the series, by the way. I'm like at least 100 hours into, like, the audiobook runtime of it. That's not very far. But when a goblin chieftain evolves into a goblin lord, they become a powerful psychic entity in themselves. And the way it is put is they are able to call to all other goblins, even across a continent, possibly the world. As is often goblins specialize, they are able to make their clans exponentially more dangerous. The point that when a goblin lord emerges, they are, powerful enough to rival the might of, combined mights of city-states. Let alone a goblin king, which I have not gotten to yet, but I'll let you know. And that's all, like, whatever. I think the world building is done very, very well there. But the really good part, and I like good world building, but the really good part is that throughout all of this, throughout all the storylines involving the goblins themselves are really tragic figures. This is the story of a girl. You dick. There's a freaking side story where, like, every other paragraph starts with, this is the story of a, and it's so freaking hard. You didn't need to go that hard. You did not. You didn't need to do any of that, in fact. This is the story of, I'd be using a hard expletive here if this wasn't possibly sponsored. This is the story of, if you're listening to it and you hear that this is the story motif, find some freaking tissues. Don't introduce an entire writing motif just to break my heart with it. That's generally considered rude. The goblins themselves are tragic figures that do not understand who or what they are. They are without a home. They are constantly hunted and hated. And, you know, in a series that deals a lot with the sorts of to be or not to be sorts of questions, the goblin storylines are really, really damn good. I do want to point out, actually, the way the goblins work in The Wandering Inn, and also in that one thing on the Patreon that I will amend. Xenomorphs apparently work pretty much exactly the same way. I was always wondering, like, how queens are a thing? Do you just need to bring a queen? No, apparently they metamorphosize in the same way. And again, it's very clearly, it's exactly the same problem that the writers had. It was just like, okay, we need this exponentially terrible thing. In the case of goblins, they start off, you know, not something you need to worry too much about then, something we should probably deal with, something that we should have dealt with last week, now something that we really wish we dealt with a year ago, now something with, oh, we're screwed. Xenomorphs, on the other hand, start at we're screwed and just go from there. The way that The Wandering... Very loud, guys, rude. The way that The Wandering Inn makes you really feel for the goblins, but also be like, oh no, they're a threat. Like, don't get it wrong. I mean, it got me. I don't know if it'll get you. Maybe you're a cold-hearted jerk. Cold-hearted jerks also being a theme in The Wandering Inns. I was asking the correspondence with a guy about when talking about The Wandering Inns, like, don't be like too sycophantic or like, oh, it's fantastic. No, the goblin part is fantastic. Good shit. Good shit. Absolutely recommend that. Goddamn. This video has been sponsored by The Wandering Inn, which is very nice of them. You can find out more about The Wandering Inn at thewanderinginn.com, and you can read the webcomic at webcomic.wanderinginn.com. I've been listening to them on Audible, and they're very, very long audiobooks, and I've barely made a dent, buddy. Ah, wow. Look, while I'm here, there are many hundreds of hours of audiobook of The Wandering Inn all up. I want to be clear here. This is not like a one-piece sort of a situation, like give it to Arlong Park. If you're not sure if you like it, that's fine. You'll be on board. Like, by the time that it shows up, you'll know what it is. You'll know. If you think it's a very daunting sort of a thing to get into something that's already so long, don't worry about it. You'll just dive in. Go for it. If you're even seeing my TikTok account on your For You page, I would personally be shocked, beshocked, that you would not be into this. Also, if you could tell them I sent you, that'd just be, that'd be great.